They'll be calling you a conspiracy theorist. Welcome back to another day in the neighborhood. Coronavirus free so far. Hope the rest of the world out there stays safe. Um, so got a couple of things. Juan Tescrew and I, we were live last night. If you haven't caught it, go catch it. The rerun. A couple of things I wanted to discuss is Tom Kocurek. Okay, so it's very important that everybody knows what's going on with Tom Kocurek in this. So we FOIA 35 depositions. Everybody chipped in to pay several $1,000s for the money. Here's the thing. We have a very interesting thing happening in the civil suit. And I want to throw this out there because a lot of people just don't take the time to really understand what was going on with Stephen Avery's civil suit. And it really pisses me off the way his own attorneys screwed him out of his settlement. There was never really technically a settlement, it was an order for dismissal with prejudice. And with prejudice means that you can never bring a civil suit up against your defendants ever again. So Stephen Avery, as a plaintiff, basically said, "Yeah, I'll settle this. We're going to dismiss it," and it's a order for dismissal without um, it's with prejudice, but it's without cost, fees, or reimbursement to Stephen Avery by Kocurek, Vogel, the insurers, or any other person in Manitowoc County. Um, Basically, they file a lien on Stephen Avery. That money goes into Walt Kelly's bank account, a trust fund, and with that money, we have everything getting distributed to Dean Strang's trust fund, straight from Walt Kelly's trust fund, and I just have a lot of issues with this. Um, so I want to go over some of that. Cindy McKean-Elser says, "Hello, Chad." Hello, Cindy. Hope you're recuperating, Miss Cindy. Hope everything goes good from your surgery that you had, and you at least feel better. Just don't catch this Roner going around like a rampant wild rabid dog out there. Y'all gotta stand clear of it. So let me pull up a couple of things real quick. The number one issue I have with Stephen Avery's settlement, and this should be the number one issue that you as well should take into consideration. Now, I'm not trying to push my views on you. All I'm trying to do is report what factually happens in this civil suit. So, my issue, and it is a issue of high severity on a level and a scale 1 through 10, it probably hits right around a 17 for me. What we have in Stephen Glenn seems to be a breach in trust for his client, Stephen Avery. November 9th comes around, Stephen Avery gets arrested, and we have Stephen Glenn on November 15th. feels that Stephen Avery is responsible for the murder of Teresa Hallback. So he is one of the founding members of a commission that helps to change the name of the Avery Bill. And what my main concern is with Stephen Glenn, in May 12th of 2005, we have the deposition of Tom Fallon, and then June 3rd, which is not even a month later, we have Attorney General Peg Lautenschlager send Stephen Glenn an invite to join the Criminal Justice Study Commission. Now, the Criminal Justice Study Commission takes precedence over the Avery Task Force. Okay, the Avery Task Force will do its last meeting July 31st. The commission will pick up on August 31st. Now, one of my biggest issues with this problem is that Stephen Glenn gets seated. Okay, so he's invited and handpicked and appointed by Attorney General Lautenschlager. Okay, and the charter statement for this commission: no pointing fingers, at Manitowoc, 1985. Well, you might say, what the hell would Stephen Avery's civil attorney, Stephen Glenn, be doing sitting on a commission that won't let you point fingers at Manitowoc County, 1985? That's the whole thing with this civil suit, is pointing fingers at Manitowoc County, 1985. Now, May 12th, May 12th is a huge revelation when we get the depositions of Stephen Tinker and Tom Fallon. Stephen Tinker was the unit manager for the Attorney General's office, and he's basically the one appointed to assign cases as per approved the Attorney General. And of course, Thomas Fallon is appointed in this nature because the sexual assault of Penny Bernstein is a sex offense. Okay, it is done by a sexual predator, and Thomas J. Fallon, Assistant Attorney General, he 90% of his cases, when he is appointed by Unit Manager Stephen Tinker, 90% of his cases he's worked on have been sex offenses. So naturally, Tom Fallon was appointed to review the Penny Bernstein case. Now it's funny because Tom Fallon gets caught in several lies. At first, he calls the Wisconsin Innocent Project looking for certain files. They didn't have them. And then that turns into, oh, he went down there. Could have been once, could have been twice. He's not really sure, but there's an issue with certain parts of Gregory Allen's record not being reported in the DCI investigation properly. What they're trying to do is take the Gregory Allen case and reinvestigate it to see if there was any exculpatory evidence that should have shown Gregory Allen as a suspect in Penny Bernstein case. And there was a lot, and I mean a lot, of exculpatory evidence. You had Gregory Allen, number one, under surveillance with a full-blown sexual predator profile. He was a marked man. He was wearing a scarlet letter in Manitowoc County. Okay? Now, what this means is that he was definitely on the radar. Okay? He's definitely on Manitowoc's radar already. Okay, so they're bringing this up in the deposition, and Thomas Fallon is basically saying that he does not view this as exculpatory evidence, um, that there was no way to determine that Gregory Allen should have been a suspect. Hello, you have a profile and you have folders on Gregory Allen that are this thick. It's no difference from today. What's the first thing? I mean, y'all watch NCIC. You watch NCIC. Hold on, I got a little Petra. Petra Majernikova says, "Hey, you said you're going live at 1700 hours. Can you tell time?" I've never been able to um, pinpoint time, Petra. I've been able to tell time, but pinpointing it is a little different. Okay, so I'm here. I'm here. You lay down over there in Slavka, and you watch the show, and you get educated, and you just be quiet. Okay, okay. I gotta pick on Petra. Some Facebook user says, "Hi, Chad. Hi, Facebook user. If my parents named me Facebook user, I'd be pretty mad. I'd want like a real name like Chad Keller or something like that. You know, Cindy Elser, Christy Lynn, something that would American. But this person, look, their family done went and named them Facebook user. Facebook. How you doing, Facebook? So, so let's. What's one thing um, that happens in today's cases? Okay, Petra, stop, Petra. Just stop it. No, ma'am. No, ma'am. Where the hell is Slavica? Whatever your country name is. Okay, I apologize. Slavica. Slavica. I don't even think that's the real name of the country. Sometimes I think that all these foreign overseas people, they just are figments of our United States imagination. So the one thing, if you're in a case today and say you're on a beach and you get raped, first thing they're going to do is try to cancel out sexual predators that are local in the area. Um, you basically pull up your sex offender registry and you say, okay, we got 17 people within a 5-mile radius. So and so has just been raped on the beach. We're going to go knock on all these doors and we're going to say, hey, where were you at this time? Where were you at this time? Where were you at this time? It's no different in 1985. You have Stephen Avery being blamed for something when Gregory Allen, he's already on file with the Manitowoc County Sheriff's Office and the Manitowoc County District Attorney's Office. Okay, he's already been charged with violent sexual assaults prior to Penny Bernstein. So what they're trying to establish, what Walt Kelly and Stephen Glenn is trying to establish on May 12th is basically they're wanting the DCI and the Assistant Attorney Generals and even Stephen Tinker to admit that Gregory Allen was exculpatory, that his past history, his sexual predatory nature is exculpatory. And Tom Fallon's response is he doesn't necessarily see that as being so. And they're trying to make this identification process of Gregory Allen's nature seem like it wasn't known. Okay. Um, but it was. And so you have Steven Tinker and you have Thomas Fallon on May 12th, 2005, running straight parallel with Attorney General Lautenschlager's 2003 December 17th report that protects Manitowoc County. And they're trying to say there was no way to identify Gregory Allen, which is total bullshit. So basically, less than a month after these depositions, we have some big things that are about to happen in the political realm, and it is to thwart off this very civil suit. There's no other reasons for what is about to happen except for the fact that Walter Kelly and Stephen Glenn are exposing they're about to expose records that disappear. Stephen Tinker basically directs a DCI agent to take out part of Gregory Allen's file in the DCI report. Okay. And it is funny because you got one DCI agent saying, yeah, it's exculpatory. And so she throws it in. And then you have the unit manager for the attorney general saying, no, we're going to leave this out. And you have Fallon, the intermediate go between. You got DCI office, you got Fallon, and then you have the unit manager. Okay, and then you got Attorney General Lautenschlager. Well, the DCI is gathering information. Tinker appointed Fallon to go over the DCI's information. Stuff starts disappearing from the files. And the stuff that's disappearing is the things that would contradict Peg Lautenschlager's identification witness process. Okay. So they have to take it out to make it look like they really didn't know Gregory Allen was such a sexual predator. They're trying to downplay Gregory Allen, which, if you're being surveillance, you got a pretty thick file, okay? But they're trying to downplay this. So basically, Stephen Glenn and Walt Kelly catch the Attorney General's office in a very devious act of trying to hide the information. Now, it's funny because all of a sudden, come June 3rd, which is right around the corner from May 12th, we have one of the biggest political movements to happen in Wisconsin, and that is Peg Lautenschlager will start the Criminal Justice Study Commission. And why this is important is because everybody, all the members of this Criminal Justice Study Commission were hand-picked, appointed, and invited personally by Peg Lautenschlager. Now, somebody tell me why the hell Stephen Glenn is getting invited to sit on this. Why are you getting invited to sit down on this commission? The only thing that Peg Lautenschlager ever contributes to this commission The only thing that she contributes is a model policy on identification process. And basically, she's using Gregory Allen as an example that this technology, this wasn't accessible to law enforcement in 1985. So her model policy is a rug sweep to pretend like they could never identify Gregory Allen, which is total bullshit. Okay. But the main charter statement, the main charter statement for this commission is in the charter statement. No seated members can point a finger at Manitowoc 1985. That is what Stephen Glenn and Walt Kelly are supposed to be doing, is pointing fingers at Manitowoc County 1985. Okay, so Peg Lautenschlager basically has no choice but to say, okay, May 12th, my unit manager, Stephen Tinker, is deposed. May 12th, my assistant attorney general, Thomas Fallon, is deposed. And they've been caught taking Gregory Allen files out of the report. They're basically trying to rebuild the entire court process of the Penny Bernstein case and to see if Gregory Allen should have been used as exculpatory evidence and seen as a sexual predator to have attacked Penny Bernstein. That information was there, folks. It was there. And we have Fallon and Tinker manipulating documents. Okay? This is May 12th. June 3rd, not even a month later, we have one of the biggest commission task force created less than a month later, and Stephen Glenn gets the fucking invite. He gets the invite to come out and join this commission. Okay? But there's a charter statement that says we can no longer point fingers at Manitowoc County 1985 if you're a seated member. So follow me on what happens next, okay? There are 48 hours total of depositions on video. 35 people, okay? And on October 26th, 5 days before Teresa Hallback is reported missing and is allegedly murdered, we have a very important telephone conference taking place with Judge Lynn Alderman, Tom Kocurek's attorneys, and Stephen Glenn and Walt Kelly. Now, what we have going on in this is very disturbing because we're a year and 14 days at this point. It's October 26, 2005, and the civil suit was filed October 12th, 2004. So we're a year and 14 days into this thing. The plaintiff, Stephen Avery, has made a complaint against Tom Kocurek and Dennis Vogel, but we don't even have their depositions yet. These are the main people in this entire operation of people that dropped the ball that should have put forth the exculpatory evidence to Stephen Avery's defense attorney in 1985 that never did. We don't even have depositions. We don't even have depositions on Tom Kocurek or Dennis Vogel yet. And so here's October 26, 2005, and the civil suit docket summary. If you click on the first item that's in that, it's on StephenAveryCase.org. You go to item number 45. October 26, 2005, telephone conference. Docket text. The minute entry for proceedings held before Judge Lynn Adelman, telephonic conference regarding a deposition dispute held on October 26, 2005. Now, this is supposed to be in the deposition of Thomas Kocurek, the person Stephen Avery suing here. The court orders witness to answer the questions. Now, the court is having to order a witness who is Thomas Kocurek to answer questions. So, a lot of people say that Tom Kocurek was scheduled to be deposed at a later date, but if the court is ordering the witness to answer questions on the 26th, that means that there must have previously been some type of scheduling for a deposition of Tom Kocurek, and Tom Kocurek failed to either show up or anything else. So we have to have an order right now. They're making an order for Tom Kocurek to answer damn questions. And this is 5 days before Teresa Hallback is even allegedly murdered. So what date was the original deposition supposed to be? Why didn't Tom Kocurek show up? Why do we have Walt Kelly and Stephen Glenn saying, hey, you need to answer these questions? And then we have, it says the parties may later brief the admissibility issue. Well, why do we have an admissibility issue? This is a deposition. Depositions are admissible because that's the point of a deposition. We want to know the whole story of what the hell is even going on here. So, Kocurek, whether they deposed, whether he's forced to answer questions in a telephone conference, and then they challenge an admissibility issue later, or if they reschedule, I want a copy of this damn phone call. This phone call is a tell-all. It is a tell-all to the nature of what is going on about why he's not going to be deposed, why he's not going to answer questions. And you got to understand, Stephen Glenn and Walt Kelly have already had a year and 14 days to make sure this man was deposed. Now we have Stephen Tinker, Attorney General Lautenschlager, and Fallon manipulating not only the political realm, but the DCI report, all the information gathered. They're manipulating reports and taking Gregory Allen's portion thereof, his file, out of the report that shows that he should have been exculpatory. So it's very important to know the nature of this phone call. There needs to be a transcript of this phone call. If it was 5 minutes, if it was 10 minutes, if it was 20 minutes, there has to be a reason on record of why there was an admissibility issue to not go forward with this deposition. And instead of raising this admissibility issue, 5 days later, Teresa allegedly goes missing, and 4 days after that, on November 3rd, 3.5 days after that, she's reported missing. Okay, and it's allegedly she got murdered on the 31st. But we never have Walt Kelly and Stephen Glenn attacking this admissibility issue. We hear in November when Stephen Glenn is talking to Stephen Avery that we have discovery still to do, but he never brings up this admissibility issue. If Kocurek wasn't going to talk, it's never been made known to Stephen Avery. Now, what does happen is Stephen Avery, I believe, come around January 31st, 2006. He has about $58,000 being pledged to either his defense or bond. They were going around putting stuff in the ads, and Stephen Glenn asked Stephen Avery specifically, "Is this something you want to do? Do you want to settle out the case and get money for your defense?" And Stephen Avery tells him, "Well, we got some money we're being raised, and we're putting out these ads, and let's cross that bridge when we get there." Well, it just goes to show Stephen Glenn is almost like it's like they're manipulating Stephen Avery. Like, hey, it was Stephen Avery's idea to settle out, and they tell Stephen Avery, "Hey, we're offering the state a one-time deal and a one-time deal only to settle out, so Stephen Avery can get money for defense terms." Now, there's technically not a settlement. It is a order for dismissal with prejudice, meaning Stephen Avery can never bring the civil suit back up. It puts Manitowoc, it takes them off the hook. And they get off the hook without having to pay cost, fees, or reimbursement costs. Neither Manitowoc County Sheriff's Office under Tom Kocurek's capacity, neither Manitowoc County District Attorney's Office under Dennis Vogel's capacity, nor their insurers. Everybody's off the hook. They basically file a lien on Stephen Avery and say, "Hey, we need $400,000 for expenses." Okay. This money goes straight into Walter Kelly's trust fund, and then it's distributed straight to Dean Strang. Now, I have issues with this right here too, because when you do with prejudice, when you do a dismissal with prejudice, it's basically the worst odds for Stephen Avery. Period. He's having to, first of all, be forced into this predicament where, oh man, you're not gonna have a good outcome if you have a public defender. You need a paid defense. So why are you, number one, a judge seated to this case, and you're going to file an order with dismissal with prejudice, knowing that Stephen Avery has no choice at the moment but to make money for a defense? Now, what happens here with this settlement, this order of dismissal, it puts Manitowoc County off the hook. No one else is opening any can of worms up to point fingers at Manitowoc for 1985. And this is the charter statement of Peg Lautenschlager's commission. And Stephen Glenn is a seated member, and he does carry out that charter statement as soon as he drafts the stipulation for the order of dismissal. So it's also interesting because we have Mike Fox and Richard Gringas. He is. These are people from a law firm that Stephen Avery visits in October of 2003. Whenever he is discharged from prison a month later, um, he visits them and he signed a 40% contingency fee with Gringas. So they have to wait till August 28th of 2006 to settle out who's getting the $160,000 of the $400,000 that is supposed to be awarded to Stephen Avery due to some bullshit settlement. And in that brief, Stephen Glenn submits a bio. Okay, let me pull this bio up. This bio is submitted on March 13th, 2006. Okay, so this is 12 days after Brendan Dassey has been coerced. Okay, it's March 13th. We're still settling out with Richard Gringas fighting Stephen Glenn for the contingency fee of the $160,000. Now, Stephen Glenn submits this bio of everything he's ever done, going way back to 1970 when he was admitted to the bar. Now, Peg Lautenschlager on this bio, um, on this bio, at this point, Peg Lautenschlager handpicked him and seated him to the commission on June 3rd of 2005. So we have July, August, September, October, November, December, January, February, March. We have 9 months, folks, that Stephen Glenn has been seated to this commission. And when he submits his bio of everything he's done, his commission seat is not listed on here. He's not listed as being a member of the Criminal Justice Study Commission. Um, and I mean, he's listing things, articles, editor, Wisconsin Law Review, law clerk to the Honorable James E. Doyle, lecturer at the Criminal Law University of Wisconsin, Trial Advocacy Institution, Insanity Defense Committee. That he was a member. He was a member of the Wisconsin Judicial County, a member. He said on the committee on DNA as an attorney general's advisory, and this was in 1969. So he's got all these member dates from 1977 through 85, 1987 and 1992, 1994 to 1997, 1993. Forward, he's American College of Trial Lawyers member for the Wisconsin State Committee. He's got all these members, all these bios for his membership to all these Wisconsin committees, but the only committee and commission he doesn't have listed is the Criminal Justice Study Commission. Now, I don't know about you, but if you're handling my motherfucking civil suit, okay, and you're trying to force me to settle so you can go ahead and give my money to Dean Strang and Jerry Buting, I have a problem with you because, for number one, you didn't tell me you're sitting on Peg Lautenschlager's commission. Stephen Avery never knew that Stephen Glenn sat on that commission until I had a phone call with Stephen Avery in, I want to say it was June of 2017. Might have been a little bit earlier. I asked him, I said, hey, Did you know that Jerry Budin was on the Criminal Justice Study Commission? He knew about the Avery Task Force. He didn't know about the Criminal Justice Study Commission. And he damn sure didn't know that Stephen Glenn sat there. I said, yeah, Stephen Glenn was handpicked by Peg Lautenschlager and seated. You know, he was seated personally by Peg Lautenschlager. Now, the problem with this, if you go back to, I'm gonna pull the article up to give you the exact date. The lawyer that saw the lightning. Okay, the lawyer who saw the lightning. Super Lawyers, Wisconsin. There's an article where Stephen Glenn is being interviewed, folks. Okay, and this is published in 2007, December 2007. Okay, which is really just right after. It's only several months after Stephen Avery's convicted. So here we have Stephen Glenn. Let me tell you what he says about Stephen Avery case. Avery's civil case would eventually settle out for $400,000 with the lawsuit dismissed without admission to fault or liability by Manitowoc County government. But Glenn never got over the feeling of guilt he felt the day Avery was arrested for the photographer's murder. The photographer's murder. Glenn never got over the feeling of guilt he felt the day Avery was arrested for the photographer's murder. He says, this is quote, Stephen Glenn, I wanted to pull the covers over my head, Glenn says. The impact emotionally was almost palpable. He was a guy, talking about Stephen, I thought I knew. I was glad my wife was with me that day because I could not have driven back from court after everything began pointing to Stephen. Okay, so here we have Stephen Glenn feeling so much guilt for the death of Teresa Hallback. And it's to the point that on November 15th of 2005, 6 days after Stephen Avery's arrested, Mark Gundren does this press conference. And he says, Governor Doyle is going to sign the Avery bill. Okay. But the only thing with the Avery bill, we feel it's disrespectful to carry the name of the Avery bill in Stephen Avery's name because it's disrespectful to the Hallback family. And everybody had felt that Stephen Avery was the murderer, that he was the one that killed Teresa Hallback. And that's because Mark Gundrum at this time is getting all the information from the Department of Justice, Fassbender, Peg Lautenschlager, and they're saying, oh no, Mark, we definitely got our guy. Stephen Avery, on November 15th, at the time of this press conference, he wasn't even charged with intentional homicide. He would not be charged till later that evening. Well, they're talking about changing the name of the Avery bill because it's disrespectful to the Hallback family. So let me tell you what happens here. They got to change the name of it. And guess who that's left to? That's left to the founding members of Peg Lautenschlager's commission, folks. The founding members of the Criminal Justice Study Commission. Stephen Glenn, Jerry Budin are among those founding commission members. Okay. Now, they all take a vote to rename the Avery bill to the Criminal Justice Reforms Package. and it's to reflect the Criminal Justice Study Commission that Peg Lautenschlager started. So Stephen Glenn votes and Jerry Buden vote on the pretense that Stephen Avery was guilty of murdering Teresa Hallback. And this is November 15th, 2005. This is only 6 days after Stephen Avery is arrested. So why in the hell are you not telling your client that not only did you vote to change the name of the Avery bill in November, but then you're going to recommend another partner and Jerry Buden, who is another commissioner member, who also voted to change the Avery bill because he thought you were guilty. And you're going to tell Stephen Avery to go and give Dean Strang and this man, Jerry Buden, $240,000 without even telling him that, oh, by the way, Stephen, Jerry Buden and me, both of us, we voted to change the name of the Avery bill. And that's why you don't have Stephen Glenn's member listed on the Criminal Justice Study Commission on his bio. You don't have that listed to his bio, because if he had listed it, it would have to say June 3rd, present, seated by Attorney General Lautenschlager, and I guarantee you that Stephen Avery would have had some damn questions. Now, Stephen Avery gave these people his full trust, okay? And they're sitting here screwing Stephen Avery over big time. So if anybody ever gets the urge to ask Stephen Glenn any questions, number one question: why didn't you ever tell Stephen Avery that on November 15th, you and Jerry Buden voted to change the name of the Avery bill? Because it's fact. It's a motherfucking fact. And y'all can sit here, call me a conspiracy theorist if you want to. I didn't dream that it happened. I didn't just think that it happened. I know for a fact that it happened. These are factual events. Peg Lautenschlager hand-picked Stephen Glenn to her commission. There was a charter statement that said, no pointing fingers at Manitowoc 1985. We have a order of dismissal, not a settlement. Not a settlement. Okay, go back to this article 2007. This writer is summing it up pretty good. It says, where did I read that at? She's talking about the dismissal order here. Boom, 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 boom. Y'all give me just a second. I'll let y'all breathe a second so you know how much bullshit that's in. Y'all take all this in real quick. Okay, so Avery's case would eventually settle for $400,000 with the lawsuit dismissed. The lawsuit dismissed, okay, without admission to fault or liability by Manitowoc County. And it's dismissed with prejudice, meaning it can never be brought back up, okay? Um, but Stephen Glenn never got over the feeling of guilt he felt the day Avery was arrested for the photographer's murder. Um, Stephen Glenn felt so strongly that Stephen Avery was the murderer. Not only did he just do this order for dismissal, but he recommends Stephen Avery to hire another commission member who sat with Stephen Glenn that voted to change the name of the Avery bill because Jerry Buden was one of the same who felt that Stephen Avery was the murderer of Teresa Hallback. And this is a huge problem. This factually happened. This isn't a theory. These are facts. Stephen Glenn and Jerry Buden voted to change the name of the Avery bill because they felt Stephen Avery was guilty of the murder. And this is because Mark Gundrum, who ceded to the Assembly Judicial Committee on the governor's side, he's getting all this information from Fassbender and Peg Lautenschlager to, yeah, we definitely have our man in this case. We're getting DNA on it right now. Stephen Avery is definitely the murderer. And that's why they changed the name of the Avery bill. And they jumped to this conclusion 6 days after he's arrested. And he's only been arrested for the possession of firearm at this time. Mark Gundrum has went against his whole purpose of the Avery Task Force. You were supposed to, be presumed innocent until found guilty. And here we have Mark Gundrum, who created that task force, jump into Stephen Avery's guilt when the man hasn't even had a trial. And whatever Fassbender told him, whatever Peg Lautenschlager told him, Steven Tinker, Tom Fallon, whoever told Mark Gundrum, whoever gave Mark Gundrum the gossip on November 15th, 2005, it was strong enough conviction to get Mark Gundrum, to say, okay, we got to have a meeting here. And everybody, we're going to vote on changing the Avery Bill's name. We're going to vote on it. And Stephen Glenn took a vote. Jerry Buden took a vote. And they voted to change the name of the Avery Bill because it was disrespectful to the Hallbacks. Now, would you want this person defending you 3 months later? Would you not want for Stephen Glenn to let you know that this person was one of the founding members of Peg Lautenschlager's commission that made the vote to change the name of the Avery Bill because you were guilty? Would you not want that? How in the hell does Stephen Glenn recommend Jerry Buden but forget to say, oh, yeah, Stephen, 3 months ago, just 3 measly little months ago, Jerry Buden voted to change the Avery Bill, the name of it, because he felt that you were guilty of murdering Teresa Hallback. How does this happen, folks? Well, you got to go back to May. You got to say May 12th. You got to see how close they were on the trail of exposing Fallon and Steve Tinker for manipulating DCI reports and taking out reports on Gregory Allen and making them disappear so he wouldn't be deemed exculpatory. And then less than a month later, you have to realize that Peg Lautenschlager creates the commission and then says, well, I got to shut these damn civil suit attorneys up. So she appoints Stephen Glenn as a handpicked member of the committee. A hand-picked member of the committee seated them, appointed them. Hey, look, our charter statement says no one's going to point fingers at Manitowoc County. And guess what happens, folks? When this bill, when the Avery bill, which becomes the Criminal Justice Reforms Package bill, when it passes through, it's got Peg Lautenschlager's model policy on it, okay? It's got the model policy of identification that Peg contributed to the bill, and this was to protect the Gregory Allen incidents. Okay, why didn't? And the funny thing is, they discussed this model policy February 23rd, the same day that Stephen Drizzen shows up and is asked questions about Jerry Butin to the commission hearing. Stephen Drizzen's out there as a guest. This is 6 days before Brendan Dassey is coerced. That same night, on February 23rd, Ken Hammond talks about Peg Lautenschlager's, talks about the model policy. And here it is, February 23rd. We're only, this case, this order went through on February 14th. So we're only, 12 days after the dismissal that it's being discussed. And the funny thing is that Stephen Glenn, doesn't even stand up to say, hey, blowing smoke out your ass. How do you sit there on a commission? Stephen Glenn's there, Jerry Butin's there, Ken Hammond is discussing the model policy on the identification process, and they bring up the fact that there was no way to identify Gregory Allen in this model policy. And Stephen Glenn just sits right back with a fucking smirk on his face and says, well, that's settled. Now let's go get your boy Brendan Dassey coerced. And so then we have Stephen Drizzen giving the exact hypothesis when Jerry Butin says, okay, so give me an example. And Stephen Drizzen gets up and he says, well, if the perp knows information that isn't known to the public but only to the police, and he makes a confession, and that confession leads to evidence and new information, then that's how you credit the weight and the legitimacy of the confession. Okay. And so what we had going on in that situation, what happened to Brendan Dassey is Brendan Dassey is coerced to information not known by the public of Teresa Hallback being shot in the head. He's coerced into saying Stephen Avery did it, and then it leads them to Stephen Avery's garage where they find bullet fragments off camera, which is exactly what Stephen Drizzen speaks about on February 23rd. You have a political rat race here to shut Stephen Avery up. Okay, this is like a vengeance. Stephen Avery was such a thorn in the side of Peg Lautenschlager. She wanted him shut up. Okay, this is so much bullshit going on with Stephen Glenn that, you know, instead of fighting the admissibility issue from Tom Kocurek to prove that Gregory Allen was on file, he was identified properly, and Manitowoc Sheriff's Office and Manitowoc County DA Kocurek and Vogel were highly aware of him, hence the fact that he was being surveillanced. You're not just gonna surveillance someone without a profile, um, sexual deviant predator profile at that. Um, you know, instead of challenging that admissibility, we have Stephen Glenn going straight for Stephen Avery and saying, "Hey, let's settle this out to get you counsel defense. You know, let's get you some money so you can hire and retain some good attorneys." And I just happen to know one that just voted on changing the Avery bill because he thinks you're guilty. This is what's happening here. This is what is happening here, folks. I mean, it don't take a damn rocket scientist to see this. Now it's a proven fact. It's a proven fact that it's easier to fool people than tell them they be fooled. All right, but you ain't gonna bullshit a bullshitter, okay? And I personally know how our judicial system works. I personally know what to look for in a bullshit attorney and a lot of stuff. All right, they exist. Jerry Buden has dodged questions in my book. Some people asked him just some innocent questions, and he goes to call me a misogynist, fantastic conspiracist. You know what? I might be all them damn things, Jerry Buden, but you're still dodging the number one question that I've asked you for the past 4 years, and that is, why did you vote to change the name of the Avery bill? Because it was disrespectful to the Hallback family to continue with it as the Avery bill because you thought that Stephen Avery was guilty. Now, why do you fail to answer these questions? I mean, you can call me a misogynist, fantastic conspiracist if that's what you would like to do, Mr. Beauty. I've never been disrespectful to you in any public setting. Challenge people to ask you questions. I've asked you questions. You deflect. Now, now it's time for the seriousness of this to come out. After reading the depositions of Fallon, after reading the depositions of Stephen Tinker, the unit manager for Attorney General Lautenschlager, there's no doubt in my mind that when the Criminal Justice Study Commission was created, it was, number one, a way to approach Stephen Glenn behind the scenes, set him on the forefront of a committee, talk to him behind closed doors, and whether they threatened to murder him, whether they paid him off, I don't know what the deal is there, but I know that he carried out his charter statement to not point fingers at Manitowoc County. And that's all happened. There wasn't a settlement. There was an order of dismissal. They dismissed Stephen Avery's civil suit with prejudice so it could never be brought forth again. And they go and tell Stephen Avery, hey, guess what? Instead of tackling this admissibility issue, we're just gonna be like, we're gonna tell them that it's a one-time deal. And Stephen Glenn calls it a one-time deal. He goes, it's a one-time deal. We're gonna go tell them that you only want to settle so you can get money for a defense attorney. But you're recommending an attorney that voted to change the Avery bill alongside of you, Stephen Glenn, because you felt Stephen Avery was guilty. And if y'all don't think for once that Stephen Avery had a fucked up defense attorney, yeah, y'all are sadly mistaken. So, Jerry Buden, you can do your little tours. You can act like you the greatest damn attorney out there that you tried so hard, but for 13 years you never went on tour. You never said anything. You're still seated to the Criminal Justice Study Commission, and you never blew a whistle on Peg Lautenschlager. You never, you never blamed Tom Fallon for anything. You always kept it at the county level. Everybody, keep your eyes focused on Ken Kratz. I'm Jerry Buden, and like I'm gonna argue with Ken Kratz like we're little schoolboys. Jerry Buden ain't never told you to look up. There's a reason Jerry Buden ain't never told you to look up. You see his affiliation in the political level that Jerry Buden has spent 4 years dodging. And these are questions that Stephen Avery deserves answers to. Okay. These are questions that Brendan Dassey deserves the answers to. Okay. Um, and the reason I say that, Jerry Buden made the decision not to call Brendan Dassey to the stand to testify. If Jerry Buden had called Brendan Dassey to the stand to testify, Brendan Dassey could challenge the evidence in his post conviction appeals. But now Brendan Dassey can't challenge any evidence. He has to strictly challenge the legislative bullshit involved with the confessions of juveniles and the false confessions of juveniles. Okay? Which that means they purposely kept Brendan Dassey from ever being able to get out. And then you go and put Stephen Drizzen back on, who had a defense on February 23rd, 2006, 6 days before Brendan Dassey is coerced. He had a defense to challenge the evidence found, to see if the confession weighed in against it. And then we get to the en banc hearing, and Stephen Drizzen puts the B team out there, Laura Nyrider. Don't even send in your A team, you send out the B team, and no one questions how Stephen Avery or Brendan Dassey was never preserved any biological matter, how the bullet was found off record. If you make this evidence that Brendan Dassey's confession led to, Brendan Dassey would have walked. The judge specifically asked when the shell casings were found, what date, and then what date did you go back in and find the bullet fragments. And since neither nor Stephen Drizzen challenged that the bullet fragment was found off camera and that they never preserved biological matter for Brendan Dassey when there should have been two preservations of biological matter, not just one for Stephen Avery, but one for Brendan Dassey, how it was contaminated. If you challenge all this information in court at the en banc, the reliability of the bullets that supposedly went through Teresa Hallback's skull is no longer viable. It's no longer reliable. Go home, Brendan. I'm not going to keep you here on some information when we have a bullet being found off camera and contaminated, so no one can ever test it again. But did we see Drizzen getting on that? No. So it goes to show you legislative experts. Legislative experts. Now, if you don't think there's such thing as corrupt attorneys, why the hell does Brendan Dassey have one of the top leading juvenile confession attorneys attached politically to the legislative realm come in and say, oh, hey, I'll defend you. But it's after his trial, which 6 days before his coercion, Stephen Drizzen had a defense for Brendan Dassey. 6 days before he's even coerced. But you don't see him showing up. You don't see him showing up and say, hey, Brendan, I know a way I can help you. Let me put you on the stand here. Let's show this jury why your confession is coerced. Stephen Drizzen was invited on February 23rd because he was the Michael Jordan of juvenile false confessions. He he was an expert on the subject criteria, and that's why he's invited out there. And then we got Jerry Buden talking to him February 23rd. Well, come March 2nd, here 7 days later, Ken Kratz is in his big old um, press conference. Okay, Ken Kratz is in his press conference. Somebody should have been making some phone calls. Stephen Drizzen to Jerry Buden or Jerry Buden to Stephen Drizzen. And if that phone call is not being made, then look, all I can tell you is Jerry Buden was there to drop this case. If you vote to change the name of the Avery bill November 15, 2005, you ain't there to fucking help Stephen Avery. Put that on your word, man. Got a Facebook user. If Kathleen Zellner has this information, can this information be used in her ineffective assistance of counsel claim? Well, uh, that's a good question. A lot of this, you know, you have to determine if it's affecting civil liberties or if it's information that's also exculpatory to the frame job. Now, the defense's theory was there's a frame job going in, but here we are. They're in on the quote frame unquote. So is that a civil liberty violation or is it criminal? Okay, or should it have been exculpatory at the moment? Would this information be exculpatory? And I think in an ineffective assistance of counsel claim, if your entire um, defense for Stephen Avery is evidence is planted, but you have your own defense attorney recommended by Stephen Glenn, and he's already Jerry Buden has already changed the Avery bill name because he thinks you're guilty. Is that part of a frame to drop the ball on Stephen Avery? It's all it all rolls back into whether it's a violation of civil liberties or if it's exculpatory evidence to help prove the motive of a frame job. But your own defense counsel isn't going to bring that up. They're not going to say, "Hey, I voted to change the name of the Avery bill." Why the hell would Jerry Buden do that? He wouldn't. So I mean, unfortunately, with qualified immunity and absolute immunity, a lot of these people will probably only be punished by monetary loss, by cost and fees and reimbursement of a civil suit. Should it be criminal? Should be, but as long as you have absolute immunity and qualified immunity, your prosecutors, your sheriff's deputies, your sheriffs, and even your regular attorneys, they're just going to get little slap on the wrist, and Stephen Avery's got to sit there and rot away in prison until someone comes by and resolves it. But definitely, we should have some form of consequence passed in our legislation that strips the immunity. Start handing out 20-year sentences to these prosecutors and cops and anybody wanting to frame people. They'll stop them setting folks up. Good question. Good question. So the way I see this, Stephen Glenn is approached beginning June 3rd, and he's being approached June 3rd, and you got Lautenschlager reeling them in because on May 12th, when you're deposing Stephen Tinker and Fallon, we're learning that the Attorney General's office is sweeping this whole thing under the rug. You ain't got no choice but to set the commission up, appoint Stephen Glenn, and approach him and say, look, we're gonna dismiss this, all right? We're gonna dismiss this and make it go away really quick. And that's basically what you're witnessing here. When you have an admissibility issue on Kocurek and you have dirt on Fallon and Tinker, making the DCI remove evidence from Gregory Allen's file in an Attorney General report, you have a victory in the bag on a civil suit, okay? But instead of Stephen Glenn attacking that admissibility issue and not challenging Kocurek why his deposition shouldn't be taken, not challenging why we had to get the Judge Alderman to force Tom Kocurek to answer questions, and instead of attacking this admissibility issue, you just go to Stephen Avery and you're like, hey, let's settle out, one-time deal. Let's get you some counsel money. Let's get you a settlement so you can buy counsel. And then guess what? They give Stephen Avery defense attorneys that one voted to change the name of the Avery bill because he thought he was guilty of killing Teresa Hallback. This is a fact, guys. This is a fact, and it's an atrocity to our justice system. Stephen Avery is sitting in prison because he didn't get a fair trial. He didn't have a fair civil suit settlement, and he damn sure didn't have a fair trial. And he didn't have a fair trial is because Dean Strang and Jerry Buden are sitting there making gentleman agreements with Tom Fallon. And mind you, Tom Fallon couldn't hop over on this as a special prosecutor until Stephen Avery settled out. So the only person running the show up until the point that Fallon comes over as a special prosecutor. See, Fallon's deposed. So as long as Stephen Avery's civil suit is happening, he can't come be a special prosecutor. So Peg Lautenschlager has Thomas Fassbender just taking care of things until we can get Stephen Avery settled out. Okay. Paula Harris says, I don't think Stephen Glenn had a choice. He had to side up with the Attorney General. Yeah, do so at your own peril, Paula. First of all, you just learned that Fallon and Tinker are removing portions of Gregory Allen's file from the Attorney General report, the DCI investigation. They're being told not to include it and that to say that it's not exculpatory. At first it's exculpatory, but then, oh no, it's no longer exculpatory. We removed it from the file because it had no bearing. Bullshit. When you're exposing Fallon doing this and unit manager Tinker doing this, then you had no choice but to create a commission in less than a month later, because you gotta get those civil suit attorneys to shut the hell up. You're gonna open a can of worms if you don't, and that's exactly where this case was going. You were about to open a lot of worms up on this case. So, um, yeah, Stephen Glenn didn't tackle that admissibility issue with deposing Kocurek, and I think it should have been done. Um, what pisses me off is that Stephen Glenn thought Stephen Avery was guilty of killing Hallback as early as November 15th. That's when I can factually put a limit or time limit on Stephen Glenn's thought of Avery's guilt, is because he voted to change the name of the Avery bill on November 15th. They all sit down as founding member of Peg Lautenschlager's commission, and they vote to change the name of the Avery bill because they thought Stephen Avery was guilty. So here we have 6 days after Stephen Avery's arrested. Stephen Glenn thinks he's guilty of Teresa Hallback's death, and instead of, like telling Stephen Avery what's up, he's acting like he's his best damn friend. And then he's acting like, oh yeah, we gotta offer the state a one-time settlement deal only and get you settled out so you can get some defense counsel. I mean, I find this pretty sadistic and disturbing. Don't know how you guys feel about it, but um, Tom Kocurek, Tom Kocurek, Tom Fallon, and Stephen Tinker. Those two depositions right there, and then the admissibility issue on Kocurek's deposition. 3 of those combined spins Lautenschlager into being hell bent to pretend like Gregory Allen was never identified, could have never been identified. And Stephen Glenn just goes right along with it. He's sitting on the commission. The first meeting's August. He got appointed June. So August, September, October, November, December, January, February, all the way out for 7 months. And he's just sitting there, going right along with the model policy of Peg Lautenschlager. It's so freaking preposterous and so much bullshit. Stephen Glenn, he should be charged criminally. He my question is, how do you not tell your client that you're recommending him a defense attorney that voted to change the name of the Avery bill because they thought he was guilty of killing Teresa Hallback? Jerry Buden voted because he thought Stephen Avery was guilty of Hallback. This is November 15th. How do you not tell your client that you're recommending Stephen Avery to contract Jerry Buden as a defense attorney, but you leave that information out? I mean, that's pretty serious consequences in Stephen Avery's life. It's just one big giant rug sweep. Now, granted, you got Peg Lautenschlager, who is a Clinton administration. She can make things happen. Y'all want to know about power? I don't know how many of y'all get into the political realm, but if you want to talk about power, that's somebody that could do a lot of damage right there. lots and lots and lots of damage. And you can see the damage that is done. Um, Paula Harris says it is all part of their plan to bring Dean Strang and Jerry Buden on board. You know what? I honestly believe that. I am still alive, Maz. I'm still here. Um, is Paula, it's very disturbing that November 11th we have Dean Strang answering the telephone when Stephen Avery is calling Stephen Glenn. He's like, "Hi, I'm Stephen Glenn's partner, Dean Strang," and then all of a sudden, Dean Strang has a office right across the street from Peg Lautenschlager and Tom Fallon, directly across the street. Throwing distance. You could throw a rock and hit his window. You could throw a rock and hit the window of Dean Strang's office directly across the street. Now, um, Buden doesn't come in till March 10th. I think when he finally enters the case, it's on March 10th. But Jerry Buden is sitting in Dean Strang's office listening to Ken Kratz rattle on and on about Brendan Dassey on March 2nd in the pretrial press conference. The defense attorneys were recommended. They were purposely thrown in there to carry out the defense planning. Okay, the defense theory was, oh, Manitowoc County planted evidence because of the civil suit. Well, what people don't understand is when Stephen Avery, this order of dismissal happens, it's with prejudice and it cannot be brought back up in any court whatsoever. So technically, Stephen Avery blaming Kocurek and Vogel no longer has any weight because Stephen Avery on February 14th, his civil suit was dismissed, and when he was told you can't blame these people for anything else in no other court whatsoever, whether it's criminal, whether it's civil. So technically, the defense theory lawfully has no weight on it. You lawfully cannot say, "Oh, I'm blaming Kocurek and Vogel for planting evidence," because you done let Vogel and Kocurek off the hook. You done let them off the hook. You are not allowed. If Fallon wanted to challenge, if Ken Kratz wanted to challenge, um, hey, Stephen Avery, you're saying Tom Kocurek planning stuff against you, and you're saying Dennis Vogel planning stuff against you. Didn't you just sign a order of dismissal on February 14th that we told you can no longer bring this up? So why is your defense theory they planted evidence on you for your civil suit? You done sit there and told the Supreme Court in your federal civil suit that, hey, they're not responsible for anything. They're off the hook without adjudication, without costs, without fees, without reimbursements. They walked away from it without having to admit guilt in anything. It was Stephen Avery who was forced to say Tom Kocurek, Dennis Vogel, and Manitowoc County Sheriff's Office and District Attorney's Office in their capacity in the insurers had nothing to do with Manitowoc 1985 with your wrongful conviction, Stephen Avery. So Stephen Avery, come February 23rd, when Dean Strang attaches himself to this case, technically, lawfully, legally, he cannot go forward with the defense that they planted this information on me. That could have been shut down. Bam. You know what happens? Fallon sits there and tells Jerry Buden and Dean Strang, if you want to do this, you do so at your own peril. Um, they're they're making a dog and pony show out of it. I guess that was an obstacle that Tom Fallon said he would handle whenever he got there. Instead of instead of telling them, hey, you can't do this defense, you made it just look like you do so at your own peril. When technically, by law, lawfully, he should have said, look, Stephen Avery settled out. Why are you even mentioning Tom Kocurek? Why are you mentioning Dennis Vogel planning stuff on him? Avery's done said, oh, they had nothing to do with it. You can't bring the planning theory back up. It's not lawful. You done settled it out with prejudice. Can never, ever, ever be brought back up in any court. So y'all tell me how the hell they get away with that theory. Now, Kathleen Zellner, she's a loophole artist, and she will sue the shit out of you after she gets her client out. She's really busy with other cases, but I don't think she's really grasped the concept of everything that's going on at this point. This is a lot of stuff to digest, and it's really, I mean, it was a lot to research, but when you timeline it and you see the pattern that's happening here, it's not hard to see what really happened and what went down and why we have Stephen Glenn recommending Jerry Buden and also Dean Strang. How's he Stephen Glenn's partner and then all of a sudden he ain't the partner? It's a lot of issues with this thing. A lot of issues with this thing. And it's all dropped off in the political realm. Um, Stephen Glenn was approached by Lautenschlager. He's handpicked, appointed to sit to her committee. In his own bio, he had 9 months to report that he's been sitting on this commission. Never does he. Never tells Stephen Avery he sat on Peg's commission. Never tells Stephen Avery that he voted to change the name of the Avery bill. Never told Stephen Avery that he felt he was guilty for Teresa's murder. Never told Stephen Avery that the attorney, Jerry Buden, he was recommending, voted to change the name of the Avery bill because Jerry Buden thought Stephen Avery was guilty. What the hell is going on here, folks? I mean, Stephen's got really bad luck with the law, and is like I said, if Manitowoc County could ever offer credible proof in a fair trial that Stephen Avery murdered Teresa Hallback and Brendan Dassey murdered Teresa Hallback, you give those two men a fair trial, I'll accept it. Okay? I'll accept their convictions in a fair trial. But that will never happen. The reason it'll never happen is because Stephen Avery, everything in his case was premeditated. His trial was premeditated to be a loss by his own attorneys. We got Richard Mahler. Richard Mahler, during deliberations, is removed as a juror because there was supposedly an emergency with with his stepdaughter, and all it was a little fender bender in Sheboygan County, single car accident, but they let Richard Mueller off the hook. Well, we don't have a mistrial called because they said Stephen Avery never had the money to go forward with a mistrial. Okay. But here's the funny thing. Jerry Buden, I mean, if you see all the boxes in Making a Murderer that they're pulling in on his case and stuff, a lot of these boxes is Jerry Buden's own research from December 23rd, 2003 to February 2007 during the trial. 4 years, okay? 4 years of just nearly 4 years of just volunteer research Jerry Buden has done for the Avery Task Force and the Criminal Justice Study Commission. Now it's funny because Jerry Buden has volunteered his time for these commissions for 4 years, okay? He's volunteered his time. Not a paid position to sit on Avery Task Force, not a paid position to sit on the Criminal Justice Study Commission. It's a volunteer time. And the issues Jerry Buden worked on was jailhouse snitches, electronic monitoring, DNA contamination, tunnel vision, and statute of limitation. Stephen Avery's case in this would be, recharging them with a firearm as a felon for possession. So every issue that Jerry Buden has tackled for the past 4 years is an issue in Stephen Avery's trial. So if you can volunteer to handle those issues for free for 4 years, why the hell can you not call a mistrial and go forward and volunteer to make sure that Stephen Avery gets a fair trial? Why can't you say, hey, Peg Legislator, I need your help? You're sitting on the commission, Jerry Buden. Those issues, jailhouse snitching, tunnel vision, contamination, DNA, statute of limitations on offenses, and electronic monitoring, which involves Brendan Dassey, those were all issues that were supposed to be prevented from helping wrongful convictions occur. You're sitting on this commission, and Stephen Avery, your client, is facing these issues, but yet you never call Peg Glottenschlager to intervene. And if y'all want to say she couldn't intervene, you're damn dead wrong, because they had the new Wisconsin government experiment, which allowed, there's a legislative law passed where on wrongful conviction issues specifically, the Attorney General could intervene into a jurisdiction, any of the 73 counties in Wisconsin, and say, hey, this isn't going to work this way. We're tackling this issue right now. We're tackling this issue right now, and I'm going to intervene. So why does it Peg Lottenschlager have an invite from Jerry Buden to intervene and put the Department of Justice in their place? Because we're not just messing up at the county level. You have DCI talking about bones that are found in a burn pit, yet we have no gridding of the burn pit. We have no photography done at the burn pit, and it's just rammed in with a front end loader, and all the dirt's hauled off to the Calumet County garage, sheriff's office garage, and sifted through. and all of a sudden we start finding bones. Okay, you have the state crime lab contaminating stuff. You have bullets being found, bullet fragments being found off record. These are issues that the Wisconsin new governance experiment would have allowed Peg Lautenschlager to be invited into this case and say, hey, look, we're not going to stand for this. But why would she do that when she already has Fassbender there from her office and she already has Tom Fallon there from her office? Hey, Tom, y'all see anything suspicious? Y'all let me know. I'm going to be in my office drinking coffee and uh, puppeteering this case from the background. Jerry Buden had an obligation. Jerry Buden's obligation was to blow a fucking whistle. If we don't have a whistle being blown by Jerry Buden, then you can definitely tell Jerry Buden's position. And again, Stephen Avery never knew that Jerry Buden sit on the Criminal Justice Study Commission until after the fact. Okay, it was years later when he found out. He damn sure didn't know Stephen Glenn was there, and it's an atrocity. It's what's helped. It's what helped go against his favor, not only in his civil suit, but in his criminal defense. They all go hand in hand. Uh, Stephen Glenn and Jerry Buden. They're collecting half the monies that come out of this $400,000 order of dismissal. I'm not even going to call it a settlement. It's an order of dismissal. Shut your damn client up. We're not going to grill Kocurek anymore. We're not going to grill Vogel. We had a year and 14 days to do that shit. You got 35 depositions, and the only people that you really need depositions from, they're not even speaking. It was highway robbery of a man's freedom and a young kid's freedom who is collaterally damaged in the process because of political reasons. Stephen Avery is a political prisoner, and Brendan Dassey is your collateral damage. We don't have fair trials because we had the Attorney General's office involved from the beginning. She got involved as early as June 3rd of 2005, 20 something days after the depositions of Tom Fallon and unit manager Stephen Tinker. And they were cracking down and saying, hey, which Walt Kelly was the one who was cracking down on them harder than Stephen Glenn. They were basically saying, hey, we got shit missing from this DCI report that you basically told the DCI agents, the special agents investigating this case, that there should be no exculpatory evidence on Gregory Allen when there was exculpatory evidence. Peg Lautenschlager had no choice but to intervene, but to take over the Avery Task Force, set up the commission, and seat Stephen Glenn. And when she seated Stephen Glenn, June 3rd, 2005, this is when Stephen Avery's life goes to hell in a handboat. It's premeditated to fuck his life up. Premeditated. Okay? 5 months to the date that Teresa Hallbeck's reported missing on November 3rd. June 3rd to November 3rd. All this is being premeditated. I mean, we even have a civil suit settlement which isn't even a settlement at all. They like to call it a settlement, but it is strictly an order of dismissal with prejudice, meaning it can never be brought up again in any courthouse. But yet, you bullshit, pull out the charades. Oh, Tom Kocurek planted evidence. You can't use that no more, Stephen Avery. They're sitting there appeasing you with the defense theory of Manitowoc County planted the evidence, but yet Manitowoc County's already off the hook. They're already off the hook, folks. So you tell me how the hell this goes on, and you tell me how the hell Stephen Avery got the best defense attorneys there were. Tell me how the hell that he gets the best defense attorney there are when Jerry Buden on November 15th voted to change the name of the Avery bill because it's disrespectful to the Hallbacks because they think Stephen Avery is the murderer of Teresa Hallback. y'all tell me where the hell y'all believe that that's the defense attorney that y'all would want for Stephen Avery in this case. I mean, I'm waiting for y'all to justify that. TikTok Manitowoc, Eric Jose, Paul Capaldi, Jax West, Laura Keck, Casey Martinez, any of you, anybody, justify how Jerry Buden and Dean Strain were the perfect attorneys for Stephen Avery. You can't justify it when you look at what's going on May 12th and what happens on June 3rd and the events of how Jerry Buden and Dean Strain come into play. You cannot justify that they were the best attorneys to take on this case. This is a make-believe trial, and the conviction to put Stephen Avery away is premeditated. And they used Brendan Dassey to help it go down. We got January 31st, 2006. Stephen had just got out of the hospital from this kidney stone. Okay. He's eventually got about roughly $58,000 of people pledging money either for his bail or for a defense attorney, whatever he could use it on, but he's got people to pledge up to $58,000. And so what do they do to try to discredit and stop people from making contributions to Stephen Avery? Because if he gets enough money, he can hire defense attorneys and keep the civil suit running. Okay? He doesn't have to necessarily settle out this moment. So did they purposely try to thwart off people raising money for him? You damn right they did. January 31st, Sheriff Poggle makes a jail memo, and it says to watch Stephen Avery's actions, make sure he doesn't possibly commit suicide because we're going to have more charges on him and then possibly the next several weeks to come. And this is where they got Marie Avery and her mother to go and state that Stephen Avery had raped her in 2004, and I believe the district attorney says, hey, we're not going to charge him at this moment because he's facing intentional homicide charges, and there would just be no reason to charge him for that in case he's convicted on this other thing. Well, what it's doing is causing an uproar in the media So publicly, now these people who are donating money to Stephen Avery and pledging for his A bond or B money to raise money for a defense counsel is being perverse because now they're trying to portray Stephen Avery as a rapist of a family member. Okay, and that's purposely done because we don't want Stephen Avery getting funds from public interest. We want Stephen Avery to be forced into a settlement. Okay, y'all follow? Y'all get what I'm saying? They want to force Stephen Avery to settle because if you can force him to agree to dismiss and settle out, then the civil suit drops. Now, let's say if someone come along before that rape story and said, "Hey, we got $58,000. I'll match that because I believe Stephen is innocent of his 1985 crimes, and I believe he's innocent of Hallback." And yeah, they could have damn well planted evidence on him. We're going to give him another 58,000. Then he would have had $116,000 in the kitty, and it probably would have snowballed. By the time you get $58,000, that's a lot of money for people to pledge. But they come out with the Marie Avery story to make him look like a rapist all of a sudden. Stephen Glenn, come January, even come November, did not have Stephen Avery's best interests at heart. You changed the name of the Avery bill because you thought he was guilty of murdering Teresa Hallback. He even admits it in his own statement that he couldn't live with the thought of it. I mean, this is pretty sickening and disturbing events happening. So yeah, if y'all get a chance to ask Jerry Buden a question, ask him why he voted to change the name of the Avery bill. I mean, you can call me a misogynist, fantastic conspiracist, Jerry Buden, but that doesn't negate the fact that you're dodging a question, a very important question. But so the admissibility issue with Kocurek, this just brings up the nature of the events around it, where Stephen Glenn's charter statement as a seated member, you can no longer point fingers. You can no longer point fingers at Manitowoc County. And then Jerry Buden sitting on the commission for his dog and pony defense for Stephen Avery. How do you sit there and knowing that Stephen Avery settled, it's with prejudice, and you can't bring the facts back up? How do you knowingly continue to sit on the commission, point fingers at Manitowoc, and nobody say a word to you about it? No one says, "Hey, Jerry, you're a seated member of the commission. You can't point fingers at Manitowoc County like this." Not at Kocurek and Vogel as part of your defense. They planted evidence. It's a dog and pony show, folks. That's what you got here. Every bit of it. So I challenge you, look with better eyes, hear with better ears, and if you want to speak, ask Jerry Buden the question on November 15th. why did you vote to change the name of the Avery bill? And if he runs away from that answer, if he blocks you, you know, you already know what time it is. So, Facebook user, if Pagel thought Avery might commit suicide, why would he want anyone trying to prevent it? Surely Stephen killing himself would have solved a lot of their problems. I saw that transcript email or whatever you call it, and I even wondered that at the time I read it. If they wanted to rid Stephen of belly, then why not let him do the job himself? Well, um, we got some issues with Stephen committing suicide. Number one, you're already in the wake of a civil suit still. Um, Suicide would be suspicious, and you definitely don't want it to look like Manitowoc County took Stephen Avery out on a suspicious death, because then you have the wrongful death suit. I mean, I don't think Stephen Avery would have committed suicide. If he was going to, he would have by now. They could have been planning to kill him. If See, the way I look at it, December 2nd, they had filed a motion to make sure the discoveries come in by February, I think February 1st, February 12th, somewhere along February before the order of dismissal came. All the discoveries had to be come in. That was ordered December 2nd of 2005. So come January 31st, if Stephen Avery didn't settle, I say they probably would have tried to kill him and probably would have tried to say it was suicide. And that's if he continued with discovery and not settle out with the civil suit. I think they would busted his ass pretty good. Um, that's just my opinion on that. Because if you can continue with that discovery, you have to get Tom Kocurek to have a war with the civil suit team on his admissibility issues. Why his deposition should be inadmissible to court. Why don't we keep it out? It's a deposition. Why the hell are you keeping out a deposition? Especially when Kocurek is one of the person's top name in the case, alongside Dennis Vogel. They didn't want the admissibility issue challenged. They had no choice but to settle Stephen Avery out. And I believe that if Stephen didn't agree to anything, of being roped and doped into what he's being told is a settlement, but it's a dismissal, I believe they would have killed him. They would have had no choice but to kill Stephen Avery before this admissibility issue gets challenged. So yeah, I can see a suicide there. You'd have some issues with it, wrongful death suit, but I could definitely see whatever they wanted to do to keep Kocurek swept under the rug. They were protecting Tom Kocurek. I mean, when the unit manager tells you, "Hey, take this out of the DCI report because it's exculpatory evidence against Gregory Allen that Tom Kocurek, the sheriff, had in his possession at the time they pointed all fingers at Stephen Avery," then yeah, I wouldn't want. I'd have an admissibility issue also. The admissibility issue saying that, hey, I fucked up. I'm Tom Kocurek, and I screwed Stephen Avery over. That's the only issue that's really going down, because Gregory Allen could have been identified. But that's my time, guys. It's right at 2 hours, and I'll catch you next time. Um,